All right, traders, good afternoon. This is Christian from Market Trader Group, and this is your end-of-day market commentary for Tuesday, September 17th. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that I'm going through is for information purposes only, not giving any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer right there. All right, so a little bit of a fade, a little bit of perhaps profit taking ahead of the Fed for tomorrow. I think all this, that makes logical sense to me. I think that we've been on a pretty nice run the last week and a half, and a little bit of profit taking on the long side, and a little bit of short covering too. And I think if you look at what were the best performing areas today, it was your things with some areas that were a little bit either under owned or have a high short interest. So for example, solar, right, clean energy, these have been big underperformers this year. Also traditional energy in there too, but I don't think traditional energy like OIH XLE has a big short interest, just underexposed. Maybe there is some shorts in there too as of recent, but I think that's why you had these outperformers is, folks just dial down their exposure a little bit, both on the long side and on the short side, especially when you think about how a hedge fund functions, right? A lot of times they have both longs and shorts. So that could be some of the reason for the day, for why we've seen that, maybe a little bit of somewhat positioning for these things as well. What I thought was kind of interesting today too is just the defensives lagged. And again, you can kind of think about that too in terms of, maybe some longs taking some profits. Those have been that has been a very strong area. So I'll go through some of these charts in just a second. Let me just get this out of the way because I know that's where all the attention is about tomorrow's Fed meeting. So the announcement is at 2 o'clock and the press conference is at 2:30. So I'm looking at what the market is pricing in for tomorrow. And when I say the market, it's Fed fund futures. They are implying right now a 42 basis point cut, right? That has moved up a little bit from where we started the week, which was around like 37 basis points, 38 basis points. And so it looks like the market has adjusted to the Fed coming in and possibly doing 50 basis points tomorrow. So, what does that mean? Well, if the Fed comes in and only does 25 basis points, I would think there might be a little bit of disappointment considering what the market is pricing in. And what probably hits the most in that situation, I would think logically the small caps, right? The small caps have been outperforming. What is the market pricing in for tomorrow? S&P, the S&P is implying about a 1% move for tomorrow. So a bit of uncertainty for tomorrow, and it should make for an interesting day. It should also make for what we usually see on Fed days, which is a whippy day. Reminder: 2 o'clock is when the actual announcement comes in, and then 2:30 is the press conference. And Powell usually speaks in that press conference for about 45 to 55 minutes. He usually wraps up by around like 3:25-ish, a little bit before 3:30 is usually when he wraps up. But of course he'll give his quick speech, and then the Q&A is particularly interesting because sometimes somebody will ask him a very good question and he'll reveal a little bit more information, and the market will sometimes go off in that direction. So I think that's why it's important to kind of listen to that conference, and also just realize that we don't always go the initial move. So at 2 o'clock, when you get that Fed decision, right, the market's going to move in one direction, no doubt, right? But that doesn't mean that we're going to close in that direction. So, again, this is just something that I'm providing, going over from experience, is that the market doesn't always go in that initial direction. And it feels like that the market on Fed days tries to fool as many people as possible. I usually don't trade. If I'm going to trade, it's going to be very quickly. I'm not going to go for big moves, that type of thing. But fading that initial move is what works well a good portion of the time, but not every time, right? You kind of have to think about that. So, for a trade that I like for tomorrow, again, I'm going to be holding some positions. I don't go all flat, when I'm a swing trader. So I'm always worried about my risk. And like I said, if the Fed doesn't do their 50 basis points, if they do 25, right, then I think that the, buying some IWM puts might short term, just as a hedge, right? And of course, you can only lose the premium on that. I think that would be the way that I would play it personally, right? Because of just event risk. All right, let's talk about the technicals for a minute. Look at where the SPY got to, right to the top of the value area for the month, and then kind of rejected that a little bit. So 563.89 is still the level to watch. Also, when you look at the 1 hour chart, just to kind of show you what this did here, right? We just kind of tucked under here, right? Just to kind of give you a zoomed in view. Also, S&P futures, I think, are kind of interesting too, because there's this VPOC that's kind of just, I mean, it's right there, and very close to being taken out there. So interesting to see how close that we got to there. Right. So that's S&P. And again, I'm going to go back to SPY here for a minute, and then we'll do the same exercise with the other indices really quickly. But that's where we close there. For the Qs, is still kind of a bit weaker, right? And fighting with that downtrend line. Now, we didn't lose any ground here. We didn't lose, it's still above the 5-period moving average. And that's something that I would watch for tomorrow. Will price break that 5-period moving average? Right. And then you kind of have to watch this 50-day moving average, which is starting to slope down. So I would say there's a little bit of relative weakness going on right now in the Qs and in and overall tech. And here's IWM. This also got very, very close to this VPOC up here. You're going to see in just a second. I mean, within like a whisper, basically, of that upside target being taken out, right? And again, you could kind of see this was taken out Monday morning and a little bit of fade, So again, very close to being taken out and a little fade, right? So that's what we've got going on right there. I was just going to go through sectors with you guys really quickly, just to kind of show you some things that I think are kind of interesting. But I mentioned the low volatility trade, right? That's been one of the most popular trades in terms of what we've seen in terms of outperformance, right? What happened with this today, right? Well, a little bit of backing off, right? Remember, these are things like REITs, financials, insurance companies, consumer staples, utilities, right? That's low volatility. So a little bit of hesitation here. I found what I thought was interesting was XLP ducked, was weak today and broke back below its 5-period moving average. So, that was one thing that I thought was kind of interesting. Consumer discretionary has actually done pretty good this week, but stalling at those previous highs. Communications, which this is Google and this is Microsoft, also kind of similar to the S&P, stalling at those two previous highs, right? Well, what did make a new high today? And I thought that this was interesting. This was industrials actually made a new high today. And, I put out every day the new 4-week new highs in the S&P, and industrials were a very large component of that. So pretty interesting. And, so this is what I send out on Substack every day for free. And I just go through I just point out how many names are making new 4-week highs in the S&P and new lows in new 4-week lows as well, which you could see there's only 3 there. Yeah, I mean, industrial's kind of dominating the list a little bit there. And I think that's the only one that really kind of closed at a new high today, and unless I'm missing something. So I find that very interesting. Here's materials that gave it a chance to kind of close at a new high, but kind of failed a little bit. SMH, and then of course XLF too, which had a good day today too, but still a little bit shy of those previous highs that were just reached at the end of August. The biggest weight in the S&P. Here's XLK. Again, it looks very similar to that Qs chart. SMH, which I also find interesting because the semis get so much attention. Notice that they're still deeper to the downside, not showing relative strength at all, and having some difficulty with the 20-day moving average, still below the 50-day moving average. And of course, the big name in this group is Nvidia, which again, I continue to watch, but really not doing much in this space. Notice it's having difficulties with the 50-day moving average. Again, made a nice move last week with that event that they had, right? Buy the rumor, sell the news, just like with the earnings report. Made a big move into the earnings report, and then not much follow through thereafter. thereafter, very similar to the event that they had last week. In terms of our watch list for the week, still kind of cooking. I'm still doing, pretty well. Some power companies are doing pretty well. VST has made a nice move this week, up 5.5% from the trigger this week. Also, you've got Zillow, you've got INTA, and then a couple names that are in our trend portfolio. AppLovin made another new high today. Big analyst notes out on these names. It's kind of incredible when they do that, right? They're a lot of times late, but of course, they can provide some momentum and can provide a little bit of selling opportunity too. So in any event, that's it for today's video. I'll leave it there for now. In terms of two trades that I went long yesterday. One was JP Morgan, which I discussed in yesterday's video. Was able to take one quick target as it got above its 5-period moving average, but not any real momentum. Another name that I got long yesterday was Microsoft, and I took a target pre-market, and then I also took a target at this Virgin point of control takeout too. So I didn't mention that in yesterday's video. I'm not going to mention every trade that I get into because it's not, this is a free public video and that's not fair for paying members. But, nice to take a couple targets on this. Had some news about buyback plan, but overall the trend still looks okay, but just gave me an opportunity to kind of take some of that risk off. And now I can, if I want to, add back a little bit. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.